All right, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, with every single new patch, we're going to be getting some big updates to another website as well. And that's going to be Prydwen with their tier list. Freshly updated for patch 2.3, which is, of course, WuWa's anniversary. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, do they have a lot in store for us, because this changelog might be the fattest one that they've had yet. So we're going to take some of the time today to dive into every single thing we're going to see on it. Let me just move my camera so that we're not blocking any of the text, and let's get right on into it. So, 29th of April 2025. Now that 1 year of Wuthering Waves meta developments have occurred, we've taken the time to revamp the tier list from a design perspective. Also took some of those steps in the last changelog. New tags are added, old ones are revised, and unnecessary ones were deleted. So I'm assuming it's going to be a lot more clean with some new additions. That's all being done in an effort to sum the essential traits of any character in just a few keywords. Now, some characters may also appear in multiple categories, if it's also relevant for their meta position. I think I know just who they're talking about with this one, probably Phoebe. This may mean certain characters who can serve other roles on the teams aren't present on the tier list under those different roles, as in some cases it isn't relevant to their meta performance. Like Alto being a DPS. As usual, remember characters are assessed based on the category that they're in. On top of this, we've also been talking about it for a while, so finally, a bunch of rotations have been updated for older characters with more accurate frame data and more optimized inputs wherever possible. So you might be able to use this website as a bit more of like a reliable tool for information like that. This includes a bunch of the previous cast, and we even feature multiple playstyles on certain characters' gameplay sections. All of this with calculations provided, so feel free to check it out. I think we'll take a look at some of those. I think I've gotten a recommendation for who to check out as well for some good talking points. This will be a lengthy changelog due to the amount of changes we've done in this patch. So let's get into the ToA placement changes first. Zani is going to be added as a tier 0, so the best of the best DPS. From the testing we've done and our calculations, in her best team with Phoebe, Zani's performance is astounding. Undoubtedly, it warrants a tier 0, even without her signature weapon factored in the ranking. Do keep that in mind. This is no SIG. Very high damage, reasonable field time, it's actually pretty low, and lots of damage reduction. And it's also very simple to play, despite how, well, let's be honest here, right? Zani's actually quite easy to play once you do like a rotation or two with her, despite the fact that her forte circuit is, without a doubt, this is the longest ability in the game. Yeah, this is 1,000,000%. Look how much I have to scroll to read this entire thing. This is 1,000,000% the longest ability in the game. It's just a bunch of yap, very much repetition from some of the previous abilities in her kit, and you don't really need to factor in much of it into actually figuring out how she works. So glad that they're recognizing how simple she actually is. All the traits that make a character top tier. Those ones over here. Plain and simple. We'll be looking closely at the performance of other tier 0 characters relative to Zani to decide how we'll go about any potential ranking changes to older DPS. So this might involve bumping some people down, unfortunately, just depending on how strong some of the units actually do perform relative to her. So you can expect some changes to occur during the second phase of patch 2.3 with Kachona's release. So be on the lookout for that. We'll see if the tier list is getting some changes, because I'm going to be honest here, there's a lot of units in tier 0 currently. A lot of them. Phoebe's going to be added as a tier 0 hybrid, or sub DPS. In her best team with Zani, Phoebe's Confession mode provides a massive 100% Spectral Frazzle damage amp and even a 10% Spectral Res Shred to top it all off. Phoebe takes a moderate, she's not super fast rotation, amount of field time, and provides these huge buffs for one of the best DPS characters in the game. And so that definitely warrants a tier 0 placement, no doubt. I wish there was some mention of the fact that this is like all she does. It's purely, entirely 1,000,000% buffing, because Confession mode Phoebe, as we've explored in many different ways, does almost no damage at all. Almost absolutely no damage at all. Her damage is so low, even with her signature, that you want to make sure that she's actually running Moonlit Clouds, because the difference between the two is like, I don't know, 10k in total team DPS, or in Phoebe's total DPS, when, you know, the buffs from Moonlit greatly outweigh the benefits that she's getting from Eternal Radiance. Brant is going to be added as a tier 1 DPS. As a main DPS with Sanhua and a support like Shorekeeper of Arena, Brant actually has the potential to take note of, but note that it won't function well without his more optimized DPS playstyle, which uses 2 Fortes of rotation. Yeah, he's a good DPS. The thing is, you got to figure out a enhanced rotation with him to build up his Forte circuit prior to Sanhua outroing to him. You want to build up his Forte to like maybe 80-90%, and then when Sanhua outros to him, he caps it off, does an anchor, then does his liberation, and then charges up a full second anchor and then delivers that second one. The rotation is marked for you to try out on the gameplay section of his page, so we'll probably take a look at that, and feel free to try him out. Absolutely. He is a fun DPS to play, one of the most multi-rolled characters in the game for sure, and naturally his team's a lot more tanky than other main DPS ones because of his shield and healing. Rover, Spectro, is added as a tier 1 support or healer. Spectro Rover has always seen a lot of use as a rejuvenating glow support for Phoebe teams, and now that we've got Zani to work with, they secured themselves a spot in tier 1 under this role, well, because now they have 2 Spectro Frazzle teams to support with healing. If you've ever tried out Spectro Rover, Phoebe, and Zani, that is actually kind of like a nuts team. It's kind of crazy. Dan Jin is going to be added as a tier 1.5 DPS, and now that she has Cancerella to work with, as well as Rosia and Mortifi previously, as a main DPS, Dan Jin can genuinely perform, assuming you have her S6, which is the 20% attack buff whenever she uses Chaos Cleave, which is going to buff the entire team as well. Note that her sequences are big damage boosts, but at S6, with the right teammates, she definitely has potency. Can definitely clear a fair amount of content with this one. Alto is added as a tier 3 hybrid. Alto can serve as a niche replacement to Mortifi and Gian teams. However, in general, he sees very little use, but can still perform. I think this is very true. He's okay. He's not that good. He's not that good just because, well, he needs more people that do arrow damage throughout their kit and not just mostly heavy attack like Gian. Maybe we'll see with the release of Kachona, and, you know, we all know Kartithia is supposed to be arrow because her Echo is arrow that she drops as the boss. So we'll see if Alto has any use in those teams as well moving forward. So that's all the tier list changes and the placements and the shifting and stuff moving around, but wait, there's more. They got the tag changes. The partner tag is returning from the Honkai Star Rail and ZZZ sections, oh no, of the website for Zani and Phoebe. The description for the tag is as follows. The character is graded based on their best team as normal, but is especially reliant on being partnered with one specific character in order to function at the highest level. Which makes sense because Confession Mode Phoebe is useless when she's not with Zani. And while Zani doesn't need Confession Mode Phoebe to clear the content, she performs the best with Confession Mode Phoebe. Characters marked with this tag will perform at least one tier lower than their listed position on the tier list without those characters alongside them, and sometimes even worse. I'm gonna be real here. Yeah, Confession Mode Phoebe without Zani is like a tier 5 unit. Confession Mode Phoebe with no Zani is 1,000,000% like a tier 5, like tier 6. Like, she shouldn't even be on the tier list with how awful she is without Zani to buff. Zani and Phoebe hybrid need each other to perform at their best. True. Phoebe's Confession State buffs Spectral Frazzle by massive amounts, a damage type only Zani can deal a lot of, and Zani's damage is balanced around these buffs. As a result, Zani will underperform severely without Confession Phoebe to support her due to the massive buffs she provides. I think she performs fine though, I'm gonna be real. And Confession Phoebe can only function with Zani currently. That's very true. So these factors require the partner tag to be present. Zani can still function without Phoebe, but the difference in performance will be felt, and her performance won't match other tier 0 characters. Debatable, depending on how much you swap with Rover and how well built your Rover is in the team. Phoebe DPS could have been considered for this tag relating to Spectral Rover, but with Kachona being able to apply Spectral Frazzle, we're waiting until her release to see where DPS Phoebe stands. I think partner is okay to consider for her, because even if there's only 2 characters I guess they don't want to stretch the definition of the partner tag too much, because if multiple characters can support and you do have the partner tag, you could say Jinsei needs the partner tag as well, right? You could say that Jinsei needs the partner tag as well, because without those coordinated attacks on her team, yeah, Jinsei's not really blasting very much at all, because her Forte circuit's going to be, like, what, like half filled in her rotations? Probably even less. So I think they're only doing the partner tag when it's, like, specifically one other unit that you're able to work with, which makes sense. We're adding 2 tags denoting to crowd control abilities, Control and Gather, as sometimes they are a core element of a character's gameplay, especially in Huiwa. The descriptions for the tags are as follows. Control. Character has elements in their kit that can hinder enemy actions, such as freezing, slowing, or stunning them. Carlotta, Phoebe, Zhang Liao, Cantarella, Spectre Rover. Makes sense to me. They're the only units with, like, that time slow, CC, or freeze in the game. Wait, Zani has one. Maybe it's in Zani's kit, or maybe it's in Zani. And so they didn't put affected characters because Zani just straight up has it, because she does have stagnation built into her kit. Gather. Character is effective at grouping clumps of small enemies together, allowing you to deal with several targets at once effectively. Affected characters, Jinsei, Phoebe, Gian, Rosia, Yang Yang, Janshin, and Shorekeeper. Makes sense to me. To declutter some redundant or irrelevant tags, we're revising some older tags and deleting ones that aren't useful anymore. Here's what was affected. Heal and shield tags are being regrouped under the umbrella of the sustain tag. I like that. I think that's fine. There's not really too much of a distinction between healing and shielding to warrant them being separate tags. If there are characters in the future that specifically require shields to get a bonus or to activate something in their kit, I think the distinction in the tags needs to return. And similarly, if there are characters in the game that require healing to activate certain things in their kit, I think the tag needs to return as well for the distinction over there, because that would mean that you would want one type of support over the other. But currently in this state of the game, I think that the only character with that sort of distinction is that like Dan Jin might want shields more, because that means she can stay at lower HP for longer and get more of her damage bonuses. But that's like, she heals herself anyway, so it's kind of like a moot point. The description for the tag is as follows. Characters can provide effects that increase the team's resistance to damage, such as healing, shielding, or damage reduction. Oh, very nice, Tauchi. This tag is only given to characters who can provide these effects to party members other than themselves. Brant, Cancerello, Spectre Rover, Johnshin, Tauchi, Shorekeeper, Verena, Baija, Yohu, Arrow, Rover, and Yanwu. Makes sense to me. We've also judged the debuff tag to be too broad of an umbrella to regroup all different status infliction mechanics, so we're separating them. Frazzle, Erosion, Bane, Burst, Chafe, Flare, and of course, we only have the first two in the game currently. So, makes sense to me that it's only, well, characters that have Erosion and Frazzle being listed. We're removing the cancel tag and the multi-role tag. In the case of the cancel tag, it was redundant with the expert tag because, well, cancel means that you have to do some sweaty stuff to get the most out of the character. And the multi-role tag, they're putting characters in multiple sections, which is good. I'm glad that they're doing that. I'm glad that they're putting characters in multiple sections. Lastly, we're revising some older tags on characters, including the following. Brant has the ult tag added, because, well, Brant kind of relies on his ultimate to use his anchor faster, and it makes his anchor do a lot more damage when it's buffed. Dan Jin has had the expert tag removed when she's a hybrid, which is specific over here, because you don't have to play her well to get her concerto up to full. And she doesn't even get into, like, dangerous levels of HP when she's being used as a support or a sub DPS. Yang Yang's expert tag has also been removed, same as Danjin. I can see it still being kept because Yang Yang is one of those characters that does not have an outro skill that actually expires on swap. So you're actually incentivized to swap during your main DPS that she's supporting's rotation alongside her to do things like her skill, do things like her liberation, do things like her forte circuit, and kind of just like inflict some of that additional DPS during some of your main DPS swap windows, because there's no actual downside to doing that. And so I guess if you're not using her in that way, it could warrant the expert tag being removed, but, I mean, let's be real here, right? It's kind of like the best way to play her. So I think it could stay. Yohu has had the coordinated attack added, or a coordinated attack tag added, because she's reliant on having somebody that has them in her kit, because her outro skill buffs the coordinated attack damage by 100%. Fair. So now let's look at Whimpering Wastes. Zani's added as a tier 0.5 DPS. Her performance in Weewa needs further testing to see whether she clearly places in tier 0.5 or not. I'm of the opinion that she's not like the best Weewa character ever. That's just me. I've play tested her out in both her Phoebe and her Spectre Rover team, and it doesn't feel that amazing, to be honest, especially compared to the actual tier 0 options. And since we're judging her by her wide AoE abilities, it's not so clear. However, we do expect similar performance to Carlotta, so we're sliding her in tier 0.5 for now. We'll keep testing her and finalize her placement in time for Kachoa's release in the second phase. He also gets the partner tag here. Though I'm going to be real, you might just want to use Spectre Rover with her, because Confession Phoebe, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, does so little damage that it's actually a big downside in Weewa. How little damage Confession Phoebe does. Because Zani will, like, overkill some of the waves with, like, her slashes and then, like, leave some enemies alive. And then it's really hard for Confession Phoebe to finish them off, because, again, she does no fucking damage. Phoebe's added as a tier 1 hybrid. Confession Phoebe is tied to Zani, so putting it in the same tier as Jeja, I see. So Jeja's in tier 1. And that makes the most sense. Jinsei and Jeja is very well usable if you're executing optimal rotations, so we won't consider it a partner tag on Jeja. Jeja is going for tier 1.5 to 1. Carlotta and Jeja have shown to pull great performances in the latest iteration of Weewa. I'm going to be real here. Everyone kind of pulls great performances in this iteration of Weewa, which warrants Jeja moving up a tier next to Confession Phoebe. We highly recommend you try the Carlotta team in Weewa. If you haven't, it performs well. True, because Weewa's pretty damn easy now, especially with all the tokens that I've returned, like the crit one. Rover Spectro is added as a tier 1.5 support. Rover as a support isn't as strong in Weewa as in ToA due to the presence of DPS Phoebe and Zani being less felt. However, they're still very much viable in these teams, which warrants a tier 1.5 placement. They also deal, when they're built, a good amount of damage, and they can, clear the waves with their liberation pretty easily. Brant's added as a tier 1 DPS. Brant as a main DPS is very potent in Weewa too. This is because his Forte nuke, Return from Ashes, has a wide lingering hitbox which lasts across multiple waves. His performance is a bit connection dependent for enemy waves to spawn in fast enough for him to nuke them down. So if you have lower ping, he's actually way better. So be aware of that when considering his placement if this is a problem for you. So if you're laggy, he probably drops down a little bit. I'm gonna be real. Yeah, if the waves take multiple seconds to spawn for you, you might be a little bit cooked trying to use him. Yinlin is dropping down to tier 1. She unfortunately has not been performing to the same level as other tier 0.5 characters and has to drop down. Don't worry though, she's still a great character with a DPS like Zhang Liao, and tier 1 has characters that can still clear Weewa easily. So do keep that in mind. Weewa is not that hard right now. I'm pretty sure you can run tier 1.5 units and still pop off. Yang Yang is going from tier 0.5 to tier 1. Very similar to Yinlin. Yang Yang isn't really used in any of the top meta teams as better partners exist, and, enemies are way easier to group nowadays, but her general grouping is still very desirable if you need them to clear, so she's not in a bad position. But she's had to drop down to reflect her performance accurately. Yeah, with everyone else doing so much more damage, there's not as much of a need to keep enemies in the spot because you might just one-shot them the second they spawn in. Sanhua is going for tier 1 to 0.5. She's performing even better than expected in Weewa. Thanks to her lightning-fast rotation speed, she's able to guarantee extremely high uptime on her DPS characters better than anyone else. Whether that's characters she buffs effectively like Camellia, Brant, or Encore, or even characters that she buffs less but have low cooldowns like Jian or Havoc Rover. DM me if you're using Sanhua with Jian so I can yell at you. If HP pools were to increase once again, buffing would be preferred over running her in teams where her basic attack damage buffs aren't wanted. However, she's currently in a great position which warrants her raise to tier 0.5. I think that's fine. Note that some characters weren't added across multiple categories between ToA and Weewa. This is because certain the certain roles characters can execute aren't desirable in the game mode and see no such use, such as DPS Alto, who is only single target, so yeah, do not use him there. We've also had a single tag change too. Rover, Havoc, has the ult tag added because they kind of do need it to clear. And then Phoebe is going from Expert +2 to Expert +1. She's still subject to change in Whimpering ways due to Kachona's release, because Kachona is supposed to apply Spectral Frazzle repeatedly over a long duration of time, but in very low amounts, which is quite literally what Phoebe needs. Because right now, Phoebe is running into a lot of issues dealing with enemies that don't have Frazzle on them, and with Kachona applying it very gradually over time, but in small amounts, it's actually perfect for her kit. But yeah, that looks like the final set of changes. That's a meaty-ass changelog. It took us almost, on the recording, 20 minutes to get through that. Now let's get into what the actual changes are looking like. So, we've got tier 0. We got the Apex characters, and this is what we got here, ladies and gentlemen. Right off the bat, we have 3 Spectro units and 1 Ice unit in tier 0. And so I think this is kind of what they were talking about when it comes to dropping some of the units down, because I'm going to be real here. This is looking a little bit element dominant. And the fact of the matter is that you don't really need more than 1 DPS of an attribute in the long run for your account, because you'd rather have more attribute coverage, especially with how the bosses work and how many spectral resistant enemies actually are in the ToA. You got the Fallacy, you got Scar, you got the Morning Ikes, probably some other ones as well that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But yeah, there's actually a lot of Spectro resistant enemies in the game, and so this is a little bit sussy, if I'm gonna be honest. 3 Spectro and also 3 white-haired. Yeah, I can see Kuro has a type. Kuro has a type for sure. Let's keep going down the DPS list. We're gonna have Camellia, Havoc Rover, and Zhang Liao. I think it's fine. I still think Havoc Rover is like being overstated over here. I feel like they don't have tier 0.5 performance, at least in my opinion. I think they should be tier 1. That's just my opinion though. I've never really had a lot of success using them. They don't feel that good to me. Next, we got Zhang Liao over here as well. I think that's fine for him too. Brant being added into tier 1, I think he deserves it. Maybe he does warrant an expert tag due to the fact that you need to use his double Forte rotations, but he's not actually functionally that hard to use. So I think that's fair. Encore's got the expert tag as well to bump them up to tier 0.5 if you play them well. Same thing with Jian. And hopefully, with Kachona's release, We'll see Jian maybe bumped up. Maybe we'll see Jian bumped up. Potentially. Who knows? That could be cool. Danjin is now the only character in tier 1.5. I think they were just looking for a unit to put in here because previously the category was literally empty. But with that in mind, yeah, Danjin could potentially be better than Kalcharo, Chisha, and then all the other units we're having down here. Makes sense that these two are down here, and then Kalcharo has the expert tag +2 because, yeah, he can be played at a pretty high level if you're doing his 5 DM combos, but nobody has the time to figure out how to do that except, I guess, CN. Now let's look at the Apex characters in hybrid and then go down from there. We're going to have Phoebe over here as the best hybrid character in the game just because she supports Zani very well. I think that's fair, but do keep in mind if you don't have Zani, Confession Mode Phoebe is like, I think she's at tier 4. I'm gonna be real with you. If you don't have Zani, Confession Mode Phoebe is probably at tier 4. She's really just that bad without having a Spectral Frazzle DPS unit to support. Sanhua still in tier 0, which is fair. And then Jej is gonna be down here as well in the last tier 0 slot. They do support, right, some of the best units in the game. Sanhua also has multiple use cases now with Brant, Encore, and Camellia as main DPS units, so she supports some of the 3 best DPSs in the game. She supports some of the 3 best ones, so I think her placement here is fine. And she's a lot more flexible than Rosia if you don't need the grouping. Mortefi in tier 0.5. Mortefi can now actually buff Zani. Despite what you might think, it's an okay team. He buffs Confession Mode Phoebe, and then he also buffs Jian as well. So bro has actually been getting almost as much like use cases as Sanhua in the current state of the game, and maybe he'll be bumped up even further with more heavy attackers releasing. He also got like Rosia as well if you're playing your main DPS. Is doing that. So now we got the meta characters. Brant, tier 1. I still think Brant should be bumped up a little bit because of how much damage he does. He also has the same build in both roles. We got Cantarella in tier 1. I think that's fine for her. She's a little bit limited currently. I think I mean, based off her performance with Jinsei, maybe she deserves to be bumped up because she's actually better with Jinsei than Jeja is. I think we've seen the testing. Cantarella's actually better than Jeja for the Jinsei teams. Chain Li's over here with an expert tag +2. I think that's fair. And then Rosia's down here, and then Yinlin's down here as well. I think that these rankings are still like a little bit controversial. Some of these characters could be bumped up or down a little bit, but do recall that these are at S0, R0 rankings too. So some of these characters are very signature reliant, like Brant, and that could be leading into why they're not higher. Then we got Rover. I think Rover could be bumped up too, hypothetically. Maybe Rover actually belongs in tier 1 because I like their performance in the Zani teams. We're going to be doing some testing for that later today, and it still like pops off. It's still pretty good. Danjin's down here, and then Yang Yang's down here. Their expert tags have been removed. But yeah, maybe I wonder why they're not moved up with the expert tags being removed. But yeah, they're not as strong as the other units. Then we got the squad over here of just unused units. I still think Tao Chi maybe could be bumped up again because, yeah, her performance in the Carlotta teams is quite good. You put Discord on Tao Chi, and the Carlotta teams, they're still popping off. They're still pretty good. And lastly, we're going to have the support category. We got Shorekeeper and Verena still in tier 0. Nothing too crazy to write home about over there. I think that's what everybody expects. And then all the other units kind of being bumped down with them. I'm surprised that Spectral Rover is actually ranked higher than Baija, but I guess it's because of their ability to support the Zani and the Phoebe teams, which are, you know, technically the 2 best characters in the game based off this tier list. So maybe that is warranted on their end. But yeah, none of these other things are too surprising to me. These characters at the bottom are just, yeah, Arrow Rover's still dog ass. And then maybe we'll see after Kachona's release if Arrow Rover's better. And then maybe they'll be bumped up at that point. So that's going to be the ToA tier list. Now let's get into Weewa. All right, in Weewa, we're going to have Chang Li, tier 0, Camellia, and Jian. Still very true to this day. Yeah, these are probably the best Weewa units in the game. Again, I'm glad that Chang Li has a game mode where she excels and she does very well, even when you're not playing her in like Quick Swap or playing her super sweaty. Yeah, she works out just fine. And then we're going to have Rosia over here and then the 2 supports. In tier 0.5, we're going to be having Carlotta, Zhang Liao, and Zani. I think that Zani could potentially be bumped down a little bit more. Based off my testing with her, she's like not like the best unit ever. It feels like a lot of the time, like using her with Phoebe just feels like you're leaving a lot of enemies in like potential overkill or like in underkill range, and you want to deal just like a little bit more damage, and it's a little bit off. Then we're going to have Brant, Mortefi, and Sanhua over here in tier 0.5. I think that based off of who these characters can support, I think that's fine. Because Brant obviously supports Chang Li and does meaningful damage on his own. Mortefi supports Jian, and then Sanhua obviously supports Camellia. Next up in tier 1, Brant, dependent on your lag. Maybe they add a lag tag, because if you lag too much, Brant's not going to be very good. Same thing with Rover as well, because these guys kind of rely on the lingering hitbox of either their anchor or their liberation to deal the most damage. Phoebe, I still think she needs to be bumped down if she's being a hybrid. Again, she only buffs Zani, but holy shit, her damage is so bad, it's unbelievable. And you're not really killing waves with her. Next up, we're going to be having Yang Yang. Good for the AoE, Yinlin, Jeja, and then Baizha is the other support. Plunderer Tag Abuser over here. And then Encore, Jinxie, Phoebe down here. I think this is fine. Because, yeah, these characters are all pretty damn hard to play in Weewa, but if you do execute with them, they're fine. I do think Phoebe is going to be bumped up a lot if you were able to get Kachona and then get that AoE persistent frazzle application going on. Tier 1.5 is also going to have Cantarella. I'm surprised that Cantarella is so low with Jeja up over here. I think that Cantarella does, at least in this current state of the game, I think she warrants being at least tier 1. I don't think she's worse than like Spectral Rover or Dan Jin. I think she's comparable to the other units that we're seeing up here. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's just my take. And now we have Rover in tier 1.5 for the healing category, but I'm going to be real. If you're building them as DPS, they'll still get the healing job done. And in Weewa, let's be real here, guys. In Weewa, you don't really need to heal that much. And, you know, Rover will keep you topped off, has the time freeze for, like, more CC, and then also can nuke very hard if they're built. Now we're gonna have Chisha. Okay, yeah, we're gonna have all these niche characters. Just don't fucking use these guys. Just don't use them. I think that'll be fine. So, now, let's get into the meat. Let's get into the controversy. Because the tier list and the changelog isn't the only thing that gets updated with every single version of Prydwen. There's something else that gets updated too. And that is the damage calculations. And I've gotten some DMs. I've got some concerned thoughts for some people, especially when it comes to their Zani page and the calculations that we're going to be seeing over here. Because they have two sets of calculations, the only unit in the game with two sets of calculations. One's gonna be with Rover, and one's gonna be with Phoebe. And this is the thing, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think these calculations are necessarily wrong, but there is a gigantic grain of salt that you need to take with them. So, Zani has two sets of calculations compared to most characters only having one. The first set is Zani's damage potential with Rover's 10% resistance shred and blaze application. Note that these numbers are affected by a lower amount of blaze and a lower amount of buffs, and does not include full team damage. In a full team context, the damage difference shown on the website will be much lower. Nobody read this part. However, sequence, weapon, and build calculations will remain accurate. We'll remind you another time, do not use the total damage or DPS numbers for meta assessment, because I'm gonna have to play this again, guys. We got my video over here, right? Zani Doom posting is out of control, and what I do in this video is I look at some pretty definitive stuff when it comes to the different levels of performance between these two characters. That is what Confession Mode Phoebe's Liberation does when she's on 280% critical damage and 2k attack. Confession Mode Phoebe's Liberation does not even above 30k damage at a full build. With Eternal Radiance on, by the way. And max stacks because it's at 10. This is awful damage. And this is what Rover does. This is what Rover does. Yeah, that's the second hit of Spectral Rover's Liberation. That is dealing, you can see over here, 105k on a full build. 105k on a full build on Spectral Rover's Liberation. And this is the thing, Spectral Rover's Liberation actually has two hits attached to it. And so the fact of the matter is that you're not seeing the team damage, but in actuality, right? Spectral Rover's Liberation can oftentimes end up dealing more damage than Phoebe's entire rotation when she's in Confession mode. This is if your Spectral Rover is built. I've had a lot of people saying, well, Spectral Rover can only deal damage like that if they're built. That was actually a point of critique to the point that I was making. And it's like, no fucking shit, bro. Yes, when the character is built, they're able to deal damage. Surprisingly enough, when the character is built, they're able to deal damage. I know it's a wild concept, an absolutely wild concept. But this move can actually deal more damage than Phoebe's entire rotation if they have a specific sort of build going on and they're on Eternal Radiance. And that's the thing, guys, right? That's the difference between these two. We're only looking at Zani's buffed damage in a vacuum with these charts. That is all we are looking at over here. Zani's personal damage with Rover's buffs, and then Zani's personal damage with Confession Phoebe's buffs. We're not looking into how Confession Phoebe basically does not deal damage at all. We're not looking into that. And then we're also not looking into the fact that Rover Spectral actually deals a significant amount of damage across their kit and across their rotation in comparison. So I don't think that there's an issue at all with these numbers. I think they're calculated perfectly just fine. I don't think there's an issue. But because we're not looking at team damage, yes, one's going to look way higher than the other. In actuality, I think people have done some testing, right? I think people have done some testing. The difference between Spectre Rover and Confession Phoebe when Zani teams in total team damage, it's like what? Like 20? It's like 20. It's no more than 30%. Some people are saying 20 to 25. And this is the thing. You don't need that additional team damage to clear any of the content in the game. You'll just clear it faster. And if it gets to a point where you feel like you need Confession Phoebe with that increase in team damage to clear stuff in the game, then that's where it becomes a problem. But right now, guys, the difference is not that big. And it's not a huge problem. And there are still going to be a lot of people doom posting about it. All right, we got Fobmaster, the Phoebe shill in here. How hard does S Rover hit without Chang Li Sig? Still pretty hard. Maybe you'll deal like, I don't know, 40k less. 40k less per rotation. That would be my rough number. Maybe like 40k less per rotation. You're still definitely doing maybe double the damage that Phoebe does. You're still dealing maybe double the damage that Phoebe does. But, you know, the thing is, Fob, you'll never be able to compare the numbers because all your characters are S6. So, yeah, I guess you have to go into other more responsible CC's chats, more fiscally responsible CC's chats to get the final rundown, don't you? Yeah. If only all your characters weren't S6, you'd be able to reliably test this yourself. So yeah, that's going to be my final point of view on this entire situation. I know that a lot of people saw these numbers. They're freaking out about it. They're like, oh my, how could Kuro do this? How could Kuro make a character deal almost 90% more damage? That's because Phoebe is giving up all of her personal damage to buff. And Phoebe is doing nothing in terms of team damage. She's converted it all to buffing. While Spectre Rover doesn't have as many buffs, and so Zani's damage in a vacuum looks lower, but Spectre Rover does a fuck ton more damage than Phoebe. So that's going to be my final take on the issue. Again, I've done all the testing. We have our first impressions video out, if it isn't, or it will be out very soon after this one, breaking down the performance that I've seen in between the units, and I don't think it's a big deal. I think a lot of people are freaking out a little bit, if we're frankly being honest, and this isn't really something worth doom posting for, despite how much you're going to see on the Wuthering Waves subreddit. And probably you'll be seeing it for a pretty long time. Because guess what, guys? You want to know something crazy, right? You want to know something crazy going on in this subreddit? Let me show you. Look how many active users are on the Woo-Wah subreddit. 377k people subscribed, 1.3k online. I wonder, why are there so many people posting but not playing the game? The patch is up. Why are there so many people browsing the Reddit and posting and not playing the game? Why does Honkai Star Rail only have 600 users online? Why does Genshin only have 700 users online? Why does ZZZ only have... Well, I mean, we know why. Why does ZZZ only have 363 users online? Woo-Wah's patch just dropped. There's so much content in the game, but there are just 1.3k people on the subreddit doom posting about the game instead of playing it. I wonder what's going on. I wonder what's going on, guys. ZZZ has 2 big Reddits? Oh, okay. Okay, we'll go to the other one. I guarantee there's going to be nobody fucking in that one either. There you go. There's still nobody here. Because you want to know why? They're all in here shitting on the game. Instead of playing Woo-Wah, and instead of being in their main game subreddit, they're all in the Woo-Wah one just shitting on the game. So yeah, hopefully this helps. Hopefully this paints some insight as to why you're seeing all of these posts in the first place. Because guys, a lot of people are saying this is like the worst anniversary ever, the worst patch ever. But when the patch drops, we have this many users just sitting here posting instead of playing. I don't think they were playing the game in the first place. I genuinely think they're just over here having fun. And of course, doing what I've accused a lot of people of doing over the past couple of weeks, astroturfing. So with that, hopefully this makes a lot more sense. We've gone over all the changes, and it's a lot more clear what exactly is going on. So with that, let me know what you all think. Peace.